Hello dear students, welcome back again to Chinmoyee's YouTube channel. So today we are back with the second part of respiratory system. So yesterday in the previous episode we have already discussed about the anaerobic aerobic respiration, about the breathing process, and we have discussed with diagram the process of internal respiration as well as the cellular respiration process and the process of breathing also we have discussed. So let us start with today a new topic, that is we will be discussing about the structure of the respiratory tract. So let us start with today's episode. Now what we are going to learn today, so the learning objectives of today's lesson is the structure of the full respiratory tract, the passage of air in nose and pharynx, the structure of lungs in details, and we are going to study about the structure of alveoli, that is a group of alveoli. We will cut it open as per the diagram given there, and we will try to see what are the structures near to alveoli and what is an alveoli. We will also discuss about the inner lining of the respiratory tract in detail. So these 5 topics we will be covering today, and in the upcoming episode we will be discussing about the blood supply to the lungs, that is the alveolar gas exchange. So exchange of gases between the alveoli and the lungs and the capillaries and the tissues. So dear students, you need to subscribe to my channel to know more in this lesson as well as in the other lessons which I am teaching as per your curriculum. So to know more about my updates, stay tuned, stay updated with all my lessons, and try to subscribe and share my lesson to all your friends and those who are studying as in your standard. So let us start with today's episode of this respiratory system structure. Now we are here with the structure of the respiratory system. So the structure of the respiratory system, it starts from the nostrils. And it ends in the alveoli and the lungs. So from the nostrils first we are the nasal passages, they open out through 2 nostrils. So these are the 2 nostrils which are separated by a cartilaginous septum. So there is a cartilaginous septum which is separating the 2 nostrils. So in between 2 nostrils, you know there is a cartilaginous septum, right? So which is separating the 2 nostrils. Now after the nostrils, there is an inner nasal passage which is having hairy ciliated epithelium, and they are also having mucus secreting cells. So in the nasal cavity, they are hairy ciliated epithelium and mucus secreting cells. So what are these mucus secreting cells doing? They are always having a rich blood supply inside the nasal passage, and they are keeping the air inside the nasal cavity moist and warm. Now if by chance some entry of microbes or dust particles are happening in the nose, what will it do? It will constantly sneeze out, or that will either they are getting stuck in the hair and mucus and they are thrown out by the movement of the cilia inside the nasal passage. So either they are thrown out by the movement of the cilia or the hair cells, or they are being obstructed by the sticky mucus and they get stuck in those sticky mucus. So for that only this inner mucus layer keeps the moisture content intact inside the nasal cavities. Now next to nasal cavities comes the pharynx. So what is the function of the pharynx? Now the nasal cavity, you can see the nasal cavity after the nostril, the nasal cavity opens into the pharynx. Okay, is it clear? So it is opening into the pharynx, and which is a common area to both the digestive and the respiratory tract. So food is coming through the oral cavity. So here the food is also coming, the air is also coming, which is being inhaled through the nostrils. So it is a common area of both the food and the air. So what is then the pharynx is doing? The pharynx is opening down into the larynx. So larynx is also called the voice box. So pharynx is opening into the larynx, and larynx is also called the voice box. Now this in the juncture of this larynx, we can say that larynx is also connected to the esophagus or the food pipe. So larynx is also connected to the esophagus or the food pipe, and in this juncture after the larynx only there is a cartilaginous flap which is called epiglottis. So there is a cartilaginous flap called epiglottis. What is this epiglottis doing? This epiglottis is actually a flap-like structure which is preventing the food from entering the respiratory tract. So after the larynx only there is epiglottis, which is a flap-like structure which is preventing the food and water from entering into the respiratory tract. Okay, so this larynx, the voice box, is also called the Adam's apple. and it's a cartilaginous box-like structure which is located mostly at the tracheal opening. Now it is hollow from inside. Larynx is also hollow from inside. So when we are swallowing some food, what is happening? The larynx is moving down and allowing the safe passage of air or the food. So larynx is lowering down and it is allowing the safe passage of the air and the food. Now next to this larynx, which is also called the voice box, which is also called the Adam's apple. It is also called the Adam's apple. So next to it we can also see the trachea. So trachea, here it is the trachea. So the trachea is the windpipe. It is a tube-like structure and that is extending down to the lungs. You can see. And it is always having some C-shaped cartilaginous rings. Now these keep the trachea always in dilated position and they prevent the trachea, which is a cartilaginous structure, from collapsing. So as it is made up of cartilage, there is a tendency of collapsing. So these C-shaped rings, they prevent it from collapsing, and the ciliated epithelial lining inside this trachea, what they do, from the nasal cavities only, these cilia, that internal structure, the ciliated epithelium is here also, which are preventing the entry of dust particle and microbes into the lungs. So they are all preventing the entry of the dust particles from the main nasal cavity to the lungs. Now after this, what is happening there? Now this trachea, at the lower end, the trachea is dividing into two lungs. So it's the two tubes are called the bronchi. Okay, so that is called the bronchi. One is coming to the right lungs, another coming to the left one. The left bronchus is again divided into two bronchi penetrating into the two lobes of the left lung. So within the lung, we can say that each bronchus again is divided into many bronchioles. So primary bronchus, here also you can see that many right and the left side of the lung, they are having many bronchus. So these bronchus are again divided into smaller branches or smaller tube-like structures. They are called bronchioles. Okay, so they are again subdivided into small branches or small branches, respiratory branches. They are called respiratory bronchioles. So the smallest tubes of respiratory bronchioles, they are about 0.5 millimeter. Okay, they are about 0.5 millimeter in diameter. So their diameter is 0.5 millimeter in diameter. So is it clear till now? Now the alveoli, what are they? The alveoli are the actual sites of respiratory exchange. So the respiratory gaseous exchange happens within this alveoli, and the alveoli are the functional units of lungs. So we will go to the detailed structure of alveoli in the next slide. So just for the basic idea, you understand that alveoli, they are the functional unit of the lungs. So what are the functional unit of the lungs? Alveoli. So these are the main functional units of lung. And each alveolus has a dense supply of blood capillaries. So they are having a dense supply of blood capillaries. Is it clear? So they are having a dense supply of blood capillaries. Each alveolus, they are having a dense supply of blood capillaries, and there are over 700 million alveoli present in the lungs. So how many alveoli are present in the lungs? There are almost 700 million of this alveoli present in the lungs. So this is what is the external, the respiratory structure. So there are 700 million alveoli present in the lungs, and this is the overall respiratory system structure. Now next, in the lungs, there are a pair of highly elastic and hollow membranous bag-like structures in the thoracic cavity. So these two are the lungs, and you can see down the lungs, broad lower surface of the lungs, it is resting on a sheet. So it is resting on a sheet of muscle, which is the diaphragm. The right lung is always larger than the left one, and the lungs are surrounded by two membranes which are called the pleural membrane. So the membranes which are covering the lung, what are they called? They are called the pleural membrane. So it is the membrane which is protecting the lungs from several damage and all, and in between the pleural membrane and the lungs there is a space which is filled with the pleural fluid, and this cavity is called the pleural cavity. So these are very important points. So this is pleural membrane, and the space between the pleural membrane is the pleural cavity, and the fluid which is filled in it is called the pleural fluid. So anything related to lungs is the pleural membrane, pleural cavity, and the pleural fluid. So it is acting what? As a lubricant to reduce the friction. So the pleural fluid is acting as a lubricant to prevent friction. In case of any accident, in case of any emergency, it can prevent the friction between the lungs and the thoracic wall during breathing. So it is acting as a lubricant to prevent the friction, and it is always protecting the wall from any type of damage from the thoracic cavity. So this is all about the overall structure of respiratory system. Now we will move on to the blood supply of the lungs and all. So let us go to that. Now in this slide we are going to discuss about the passage of air in nose and pharynx. So as we have mentioned earlier also, the air is entering the nostrils and it is passing through the nasal cavity. Now we can see that after that it is reaching the pharynx, and here we have divided the pharynx into three parts. That is the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the hypopharynx. So each and every part of this pharynx is having different functions. So what is this nasopharynx? This is connecting your nasal cavity to the rest of your respiratory system. So first part is the nasopharynx, and what is its function? Its function is to purify the inhaled air. If there are certain dust particles or anything which is not proper for the respiratory system, it is just preventing it to enter. It is purifying and conditioning the inhaled air. Now next to which comes the oropharynx. So this is the oral part of the pharynx that connects the mouth to the head and the neck. So it is, as this term oro is related to oral, it is connecting the mouth to the different other cavities of the head and the neck. So what is the function of oropharynx? It contains several mechanisms that are preventing the food from entering the nasal cavity. So we can see that it is there are several mechanisms which is preventing the food from the esophagus. If there is a backflow, if it is going back to the nose or the nasal cavity, it prevents the entering of the food to the nasal cavity. Then comes the hypopharynx. So hypopharynx, what is it doing? It is regulating how the food moves to the esophagus and onto the digestive system, and how it moves to the how the air is moving to the lungs. So it regulates the movement of food to the esophagus and to the digestive system. So this is the function of hypopharynx. So then we all know, after hypopharynx, there's three parts of the pharynx. There is the larynx, there is epiglottis, a flap-like structure, then it moves on to the trachea, and this is the food pipe of the esophagus. So now we will move into a bit details of the, we have taught the details of the respiratory tract, but we are moving again to a bit details of the lungs. Now here comes the structure of the lungs and the pleura. So what are lungs? I have told you in the first slide also, lungs are a pair of highly elastic, they are highly elastic and hollow. They are highly elastic and hollow membranous bag-like structure. So this structure is bag-like, and at the base of these lungs there is we can say that there is a sheet of muscle. So this sheet of muscle is called the diaphragm. So these are elastic bag-like structures, at the base of which we are finding a sheet-like structure called the diaphragm. And the right lung is always larger than the left one. It is surrounded by the two membranes which are called the pleura. So inside, this is the inner pleura, and the outside is the we can say that outer pleura. Okay, so this, in between this pleural membrane there is a cavity. This is called the pleural cavity, and in between that, this pleural cavity, it is filled with pleural fluid. So the cavity is filled with pleural fluid. So what is the function of pleural fluid? This pleural fluid is preventing it from getting affected by friction. So it is reducing the friction, and it is acting as a lubricant. So this pleural fluid is acting as a lubricant, and it is preventing the friction. It is reducing the friction. Okay, so it is reducing the friction. And now we can say that this pleural fluid, in case of accident or emergency, whenever there is something on that lungs, so that lungs is being prevented by this pleural fluid. So it's acting actually as a lubricant, and it is reducing the friction between the lungs and the thoracic wall. So it is preventing the friction between the lungs and the thoracic wall. So this thoracic wall and the lungs, the friction is being prevented by this pleural cavity. Now is it clear to everyone? This is the structure of the lungs in details. Now we will move on to the next one. Now here I have taken a group of alveoli which is cut open, right? So see this, both the diagrams, they're almost similar. So these are a group of alveoli. So alveoli, these are the actual sites of respiratory exchange. So what are these alveoli doing? These alveoli, these are the actual site of respiratory exchange. So respiratory exchange of gases between O2 and CO2 takes place in this alveoli. So alveoli, these are called the functional unit of, these are called the functional units of lung. So as the main site of action of this O2 and CO2 exchange takes place in this, so they are called the functional unit of lungs. So let us see this, what are there in this alveoli. So alveoli, there are muscle bands. We can see the pulmonary artery is there coming on top of this artery and on top of this alveoli. Pulmonary vein, which is marked as red, these are the bronchioles. You can see here, and it is alveoli is always having a rich supply. Each alveolus, they are having a rich supply of blood capillaries. Is it clear? From outside, they are having a rich supply of blood capillaries, and 700 million alveoli is present in lung. How many alveoli are present? 700 million. So approximately 700 million alveoli, over an approximate 700 million alveoli are present in the lungs. And all the alveoli is about to 80 square meters, which is nearly about the area of a tennis court. So that much of alveoli is present in our lungs. So these are the capillary beds. This is the connective tissue. These are all the alveolus sacs, and this is the alveolar duct. These are the mucus glands present in the alveoli, and this is the mucosal lining. Inside, it's the mucosal lining, and it is also having a ciliated epithelium. So mucosal lining, you all know, there only the all the dust particles and all the microbes and bacteria get stuck. So there is a mucus lining inside this alveoli, and this pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein are there on top of this alveoli. So you can see this is a cross section. So this is alveoli, alveolar duct, alveolus sacs, and it is a connective tissue. And here also we have seen that it is supplied with a lot number of capillaries, richly supplied with blood capillaries, so that the exchange of gases between O2 and CO2 can happen in this alveoli. So O2 and CO2 happens in between the alveoli and the capillaries, right? So it should have a rich supply of blood capillaries. So now we will move on to the gaseous exchange in the alveoli in the next slide. Now here comes the inner respiratory tract. So how the inner respiratory tract looks like? So the entire inner lining of the respiratory passage, that is the larynx, the trachea, the bronchi, as well as the bronchiole, it is formed of ciliated epithelium. So what are all these? These are all ciliated epithelium. Okay, it is ciliated epithelium, that is, it is having cilia, right? So these cilia, they are constantly in motion, and whenever a foreign particle like dust, it enters the entire respiratory tract, what is happening? It is the entire respiratory tract is having mucus cells also, which captures it. So, and constantly this beating cilia, they drive out the out this mucus towards the mouth or the nasal cavity. So these mucus cells, they are capturing the dust, the foreign particles, they are constantly clearing the tract. And through cough, through mucus, we know that through the nose also we and through the mouth also we spit out mucus, we blow our nose. So what all is coming are the mucus things which are coming from the inner lining of the respiratory passage. So that is present in the larynx, the trachea, the bronchi, and the bronchioles. Okay, is it clear? So this is how constantly the inner lining is in constant motion. So the cilia, these cilia are always in constant motion in this respiratory tract. So this is all in today's episode, where we have already studied about the full respiratory tract. We have studied about the structure of the lungs. We have studied about the passage of airflow from the nose to the pharynx in details. So in the next episode, we will be studying about the gaseous exchange in the alveoli in details. That is the gaseous exchange in the lungs and in tissues, and the gaseous exchange in between the capillaries and the alveoli. So please subscribe to my channel, stay tuned, stay updated with all the portions, all the lessons which I am teaching as per ICSE curriculum. And don't forget to write the comment in the comment box if you are having any doubts, any queries. Please do write, and I'll be making it clear in the next episode. Thank you.